Hi Ed, how you doing?
Right. Well,
Good. What did we talk about? We talked about the process of Swiss Cottage, was it, the library that you were at?
yeah,
Swiss Cottage Library. That you came to a point, having done the St. Hill Special Briefing course, the Class 6 auditor course, over a period of 2 years, having done the Organisation Executive course in all 9 volumes or however many it was at the time, read all of the material, you one day decided, this is bullshit, and walked off, right?
essentially.
And
Yeah.
was that a dawning realization, or was there really a moment of what they would call cognition? And did you get very good indicators when you had the cognition? Sorry, did you feel
Well,
euphoric, or that you'd entered a hypnoid state?
I felt the end phenomena.
The end phenomena. I'm done with this.
Yeah, I've had enough. I don't have to stay here anymore. You know, I'm okay to leave, which is
And did you
a
do
little.
the okay to leave routing form?
No, God forbid.
I think there are people out there who don't know that when you try and leave anything in Scientology, any staff position, you have to
Yeah,
go and see all of these people and get signed off on, being allowed to leave,
yeah,
just making sure. And that will very likely include a confessional, a security
yes.
check, some integrity processing. It all
Integrity
depends,
processing.
which
That's right.
which we have talked about before in the amazing whole track sex checklist. Have you ever betrayed your leader? Yes. Have you ever had an impure thought about L. Ron Hubbard's foot?
Yeah, I remember
That's
that
not,
one.
but so you came out. What was your state of mind? Were you thinking to yourself, "Oh, that was just complete rubbish. I'm a fool," or did it linger? Because for me,
It,
it certainly took months to get 6
yeah.
months to get through the first tranche of decompressing. How about
Because
you?
once I'd excavated the thought, this bit of the tech doesn't work.
Mm.
Once I dug that realization out of my brain and looked at it, it didn't so much open the floodgates as over the next few months, few years, bits of it that occur to you peel off.
Yeah. And that people have often talked about there being layers of the onion involved in this process.
I find that an appalling turn of phrase.
The
The layers
garlic
of
would
the
be
onion.
better, wouldn't it? With the cloves of the garlic breaking away from the core.
I've always hated that metaphor.
Me too. I don't know why.
I don't know
It's
why.
horrible.
Yeah, peeling
Anything
off.
that compares us to something, of a vegetable matter is maybe dangerous. Much better to compare ourselves to computers and say that we were programmed and deprogrammed.
Yes.
Which again is such a that thought that somebody's going to type a little code in and, oh yeah, I understand it now. I was an idiot, but steps in the process. So what, that first week after you left, you left East Grinstead, did you? Left the environs of...
Yeah.
And where did you go?
I went to my sister's flat and stayed there for a couple of weeks.
And where was she based then?
In Hornsey. In North London.
So a reasonable, more than a walking distance away from East Grinstead.
Yeah, luckily nobody I knew was involved with East Grinstead. Nobody I knew outside of the cult.
And so 2 weeks in Hornsey, what happened during that time, of which the wise speak in rhyme?
I found myself being interested in food, because you can't really be very interested in food in the cult. You certainly haven't got the opportunity to make any.
And what did you eat during that period?
I used to eat at the refectory.
No, but I mean, when you escaped,
But
and,
when
I
I
mean, I
escaped,
think you ate reasonably well when you were there because you worked in a pub and ate the food there.
that's
And
yeah,
ate the
yeah,
canteen food when you're at the factory food. So,
yeah.
what was the sudden food urge that you had?
Um, it was the ability to hang about near a cooker and use it, and chop vegetables and all those kinds of really cool things that
You achieve the ability to do that by the process of
well,
leaving Scientology.
when you're on staff or you're in the technical training corps or in the Sea Org, oh, please, in any one of those places, you haven't got the opportunity to go anywhere near a cooker.
Mm.
You're living in dormitories or in shared rooms, and you're sort of having to grab food when you can, and run, because you're always pushed for time. So it was a real luxury in the first couple of weeks after leaving the cult, being in a kitchen. It was great. It was so important as well, because now it seemed as if virtually all my waking hours were spent involving myself somewhere on the food line. Either getting it or chopping for it, or cooking it. Everything seemed food related, and that was a really cool thing.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? It never presented itself to me before, but it's an almost animal thing, isn't it? That you're going back to how do I survive, and making sure that thing that's actually dropped out of your life, which is you're not allowed to care for yourself.
No, you're sort of infantilized.
Yeah, and you're on an assembly line. You're just part of an assembly line of terminals that are being moved up the bridge. Up the bridge. I mean, if they thought about that, up the bridge, over the bridge.
Yeah.
That works for me, but up the bridge is basic grammar gone wrong.
That always struck me as being ridiculous.
Yes, we will sail up the bridge.
Let's, even from the first time I read it in Dianetics, let's build a better bridge. And I'm thinking, you just said up.
Up the bridge. The ladder to total freedom.
Yeah.
Ah! Oh, there goes another one. What's your favourite colour? Oh, no, yellow!
Yes.
So, but, I'm going to ask it because I'm curious, but everybody's going to ask it. What did you actually cook during those 2 weeks in Hornsey in the kitchen? What sort of things? I mean, egg and
just
chips?
Your basic stuff like spaghetti bolognese or a roast dinner. The first couple of years out of the cult, I was absolutely mad for cooking, and I'd cook, all sorts of wonderful things. That
you did something very funny with fried eggs. What was it you did with fried eggs when I met you? That you'd separate the yolk and firstly cook the white.
Yeah, until it's done.
Put the yolk on,
and then put the yolk on.
Make
top,
sure you got a soft
and
yolk,
baste it.
Makes perfect sense. And then there's something funny you did with the toast, and we both shouldn't eat toast because of our condition.
Yeah, toast is a very bad idea.
You cut a hole in.
Cooked it gradually, so as to dry it out completely, so that it doesn't collapse when you cut into it. I was always very specific about toast because I could. Because I didn't have to be anywhere. I wasn't rushing to go on course or something cult related. So
you also, I mean, again, I'm just thinking about it. You're also individual, independent, and involved in what you were doing. That you were doing something, saying, "This is the way I want to do this," without having to go and look at page 458 in volume 4 to see what temperature the pan would be at before you put the egg in it.
Yeah.
Or somehow involve yourself in a set of elaborate abstractions that will always keep you from actually directly being in the kitchen, as we put it, and cooking the eggs. But these are metaphors, obviously, for the deeper teachings that we will be offering for a very large amount of money very soon indeed. But yeah, that's a good one. And so the cookery actually went on for a couple of years. What was going on in your head about, were you reflecting on the time you'd spent there, were you at all thinking about what the dogma was and which bits of it? Because for me, I sort of thought, I'm rejecting everything, but I'll consider every bit of it individually and readopt it if it makes sense. You know, I mean, that seems, but you can't look at it from within it. So I chucked it all out, and it's 36 years later, and I haven't taken any of it back.
No.
You know, yes, dev T is an interesting expression, but did I spend 9 years of my life just to be able to talk about developed unnecessary traffic?
Yeah.
It did allow me to invent the dev OT, which is still my proudest literary moment, I think. Dev OT, the person who's developed unnecessary operating theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you thinking about during that 2 weeks in Hornsey?
Mostly it was about freedom. After having been engaged in this quest for total freedom for the last few years, I was actually thinking, this feels a little bit like freedom. Not having to go on course and learn the stuff that the cult teaches you about freedom.
Do as you're told and you'll be totally self-determined. Do as I say and you will be totally. Yeah. Reality is an agreed upon apparency. You have to agree with me.
Like, yeah.
I can remember an incredible sense of liberation and just saying, wow, I don't have to think in line with anybody anymore.
Yeah. I can evaluate separate bits of anything.
Yeah. And I felt it was a really beneficial thing because I wouldn't have arrived at that otherwise. I'd have just kept on believing that I really was a sensible person, and that had been proved to me absolutely through my own experience.
That's something.
It was very useful to me.
That's something that most people don't have the luxury of. No. Is having been fanatics and then realizing that that's fanaticism. Okay, so that's what I need to look for in future and try and avoid.
Yeah.
And
not join Antifa or, you know.
Yeah.
Not this week, anyway. Yeah, I mean, and you boil it down to exactly what it came. Funny, you were here. I was meant to be giving a talk at the Trent Psychological Society, remember?
Yeah.
And Tom, my nephew, who was the head of the Trent Psychological Society, the Student Psychological Society or whatever, had set it up. And we got there, and I'd written a paper. I'd actually written a 45-minute paper.
Yeah.
And there was nobody there.
Yeah.
But it was about this subject matter. It was about this sense of total freedom, you know, which, you know, it led me to write the Total Freedom Trap because he contradicts himself slightly. He said, in fact, I just so happen to have the little red book here.
Yes.
Scientology is a religious philosophy in its highest meaning as it brings man to total freedom.
Yeah.
Lafayette Ronald Hubbard, Religious Philosophy and Religious Practice, 21st of June, 1960, revised 18th of April, 1967. Then he said, an endless freedom from is a perfect trap. The fear of all things, fixed on too many barriers, man yearns to be free. But launched into total freedom, he is purposeless and miserable.
Oh dear.
Lafayette Ronald Hubbard, The Reason Why, 15th of May 1956. So that's the earlier one. But total freedom, advocate total freedom. The answer to any attacks on Scientology, you advocate total freedom. Written within a few days of the three other policy letters called Attacks on Scientology, which explain at ever more confidential levels what you do. And so to the public, you advocate total freedom. To the press, you just say, no, we advocate total freedom. But at the lower level, at the lowest subterranean level of Hades where he worked from, it's Attacks on Scientology is a policy letter explaining how to attack your enemies, how to undermine and destroy anyone who
Yeah.
opposes and criticizes you in no uncertain terms, you know.
Well,
But
that's why OSA, the OSA terminal, who used to come and be a missionaire at Birmingham Morgue every other week.
terminal.
Yeah, the OSA terminal.
OSA being the Office of Special Affairs, which is the Department of Scientology that was the rename for the Guardian's office, which looked
Yeah,
after,
and this guy used to turn up
you know,
at Birmingham Morgue, and he was there handling some SP in the community. Some
suppressive person in the community.
Yeah, he would be handling somebody in the Birmingham field who was antagonistic towards Scientology.
Had
And
publicly criticized Scientology, yeah.
I was always interested in why, you know, why could anybody want to be antagonistic?
Yeah.
What beats me. So it would be interesting to find out why. And I'd always ask the guy, why? Why are they antagonistic? And he'd say, it's too much like freedom. Every time he'd say, it's too much like freedom. He was well-hatted. He had been trained properly.
Mm.
That's how you handle people who criticize Scientology. You hammer home the freedom button.
Yep. You find out everything you can about them from public records, which is called overt data collection. And then you find out everything you can through breaking and entering, burglary, theft, false imprisonment, kidnapping, all charges that they pled guilty to, as part of an 800-page training course the investigation had, which in fact changed its title. After the Guardian's office changed over, it's an 800-page pack, and it is identical, the 1990s version under the Office of Special Affairs, the investigation full hat, 800 pages of it, but they changed the title. They took the phrase Guardian's Office off the cover and put Office of Special Affairs. For real,
Oh,
for
right.
real. I've seen both of these
That's all they did.
religious artifacts, you know. And, yeah, the rest of it's exactly the same, and it does talk about breaking and entering, for example.
Yeah.
It still has that piece in it. It still has training routine lying, and it still has Ron Hubbard's conference for the investigators, which is a transcript of a tape made by Hubbard. And people who've done this course say he didn't know anything about it, what we were doing. And you're going,
Yeah.
I told you to do it in there. You read The Spy and His Masters. You read Black Boomerang. You read Sun Tzu. You read Clausewitz on War. All 4 necessities to complete that spiritual training in how to harass people and break their little hearts. If possible, ruin him utterly. You know, maybe tricked, sued, or lied to, or destroyed. You know, it's the dark side of the loon, really. So anyway, I'm sorry, I've digressed over there somewhere. Yeah, that's where I seem to be floating on. The colours in the room are brighter. Oh, I have an awful feeling of fear. Moo Gum Guy Pam. I can't stop thinking about that copper who blew his whistle at me this morning. So it took me years before those are pre-clear originations that you use in drills, as you well know, because you do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
And they're things that you read out in response to what the trainee counsellor is doing. And one after another of them, the colours in the room are brighter, things seem larger, are absolutely typical statements about having entered an altered state, a so-called hypnotic trance. But just one after another, and you're going, hey, this is a little bit suspicious. Hubbard's giving us a list of the things that people are most likely to say when they enter trance, because they're the things they're quite likely to say when you start auditing them. And you throw them in with things like, I can't stop thinking about that copper who blew his whistle at me this morning, because that will distract from the other 2/3 of them being normal hypnotic things. I'm going to go and stop the sun from doing that to me.
I can see the light.
I have at last seen the light. That interesting part of my day is complete. I have now closed the window. I will tick it off on my little checklist. The How to Close the Window course. Only
can't be a-
£1,500.
Yeah,
Right?
you can't be a goth until you can shut the window and obscure the light.
Obscure the light. Obscure the light. It's been suggested that I am drinking alcohol while talking with people. I'm not. I sometimes on a Saturday evening have a glass of wine, sometimes two, never more. This is cordial, and we are sponsored by Bottle Green Cordial, and this one is yeah, and it's a transparent bottle. The world can be so, and oh wow, that's a transparent bottle, or maybe you don't. It's sloe and juniper, so things you normally put in.
Is that lies too?
No, it is in fact sloe and juniper.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
sloe and juniper.
Yeah, so gin things, and it's surprisingly tasty. We have their pomegranate and elderflower, and we did have their they did a blood orange and bergamot, and then they stopped doing it, and it was broke my heart, really. No longer being able to get blood orange and bergamot cordial. How do we live? I don't know how we put up with the stress and trauma of life.
That's possibly the most middle class thing it's not possible to get.
It's the way you tell them. So, Hornsey, thinking about freedom and the advocating of freedom, and what else was going through your mind as time progressed?
A really disturbing book that I picked up by BRET and ELLIS.
Yeah.
I picked up American Psycho because this was the first time in years that I'd had a chance just to sit there and read a book.
Yeah.
So I picked up this book, and it's a really disturbing book, and I ended up freaking myself out. It's overly graphic, deliberately.
Yeah.
And it juxtaposes this overly graphic violence with this guy who's completely middle class, who goes to Phil Collins concerts and then writes sort of reviews of them afterwards.
It was very enervating. I heard somebody say that after Brian Wilson's return to life, and they said the concert was very enervating. Instead of energizing, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I'd have. I'm taking on good vibration. So, I actually did see some footage of the band, and it was great, but it just, somehow Brian Wilson's youth had faded.
Yeah. I've always thought that Beach Boys were a studio band.
Well, they were fundamentally and originally with just the voices over, and then they started playing the instruments. But yeah, they had. I knew somebody who played with the guy who played drums for them. He was really good. But yeah, they got like the LA. Is it Wrecking Crew down there?
That's right.
So they got Hal Blaine maybe playing drums, or and what's the name? K Thingy on the bass guitar. Just Bridge Over Troubled Waters, them, and everything that came out of LA in the 70s.
Everything.
With sooner or later Steve Gadd or Jeff Porcaro slipping into the drum stool.
Yeah.
Very nice thing.
Toto took over the whole business.
That really was dreadful, and that Jeff Porcaro was such an astonishing drummer. I recently bought a Paul Young album.
Yeah.
I think it's The Crossing, which is, and he says that the first idea was to make an album with Jeff Porcaro.
Yeah.
So you get Paul Young, just one of the greatest voices of all time for my money, though playing in a genre of music, kind of white soul, which is not familiar to me. Black soul I'm familiar with. American soul I'm familiar with, but unless you start throwing in Steve Winwood and Jack Bruce and all the people who are influenced by Ray Charles, or Sam Moore in Steve Winwood's case. So they are really white soul singers, basically, Joe Cocker for that matter. But I heard Secret Association back in 83 or 84 when it came out, and just Pino Palladino's bass playing on it is just sumptuous. kind of
Yeah.
melodic, you know, that it's not Jaco Pastorius, though he could be the whole melody of a song, as he showed
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell.
But he's got a tone that's absolutely unique.
Yeah, beautiful sound. And
Kind of thing.
now he's making money because he plays with the Who. So, you know, he finally made the grade and replaced John Entwistle.
Yeah.
Good for him. Good for him. But yeah, but you know, things like Everything Must Change and the version of Billy Bragg's Man in the Iron Mask, the Soldier's Things, the Tom Waits song, and so much else that is so beautifully arranged and produced. I've listened to it since it came out and never really thought about you know, what else he might have done afterwards. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Because it's not in a part of music that I listen to. So I went back through his albums, and he's not made many because he's had problems with his voice throughout his career. So he's had to stop for a year or two every now and then or more.
Nodules, isn't it?
But he's made some, he's made some incredible music over those years.
Yeah.
And Spike can cut this bit out now. We've got a little bit about soul music, you know, which is always a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So apart from listening to a lot of soul music and cooking spaghetti bolognese, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, as the prophet once said.
Oh, you get to watch movies as well when you leave the cult.
Isn't that, it's just it's an impossible thought, isn't it, that you're stuck in a place where you're not allowed to watch a film unless it's a training film or you know.
Yeah.
At least at school we got to see the Guns of Navarone once a year, you know.
Oh, the training films back in the 80s, the training films were absolutely legendary. And we used to talk about them at lunchtime because they were so terrible.
Mm.
And it was frowned on behaviour. You don't joke and degrade when you're in the cult. You're not allowed to.
You get sent to ethics if you do that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to make light of it.
Yeah,
because it's a deadly serious activity.
It is the whole agonised future of and it will be, of every man, woman, and child on this planet. Because it depends on what we do here and now.
It's a crusade.
All words to that effect. Yeah,
it's not a job; it's a crusade.
Yeah, it's your duty. Duty is the highest motivation of all. Doing as you're told. I promise to uphold and forward command intent for the next 1,000 million years.
Yeah.
While being completely self-determined. Oh no, you're not being determined.
While not being allowed to watch movies.
While not being allowed to watch any movies. And
you're not allowed to cook for yourself. If you're in the Sea Organisation, you are not cooking for yourself.
No.
Unless you work in the galley.
And for the most part, you're not really getting very good food.
You're getting terrible food. You're getting rice and beans most of the time. Until we make some proper income around here, then you have to eat rice and beans.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody ever makes any proper income because people do not like Scientology. They, far from the axiomatic, people hate like hell to be denied Dianetics in Scientology. But that's what Hubbard said.
Mm.
The people hate like hell to be given Scientology.
Mm.
They can't stand it, so you never make any proper income because it's obnoxious.
I don't think much money was ever made in the UK.
No.
I think Scientology is temperamentally unsuited to the national character.
Yeah.
Because it is a very in-your-face 1950s American approach. Yeah. And the hard selling.
And it's brash.
Wearing down. It's brash, it's boastful, and it's in your face. You know, if you say, I'm not sure about this. It's like, what's your problem? You know.
Yeah.
The way okay. Stuart Lamont, who wrote a book about them, Religion Inc., Religion Incorporated, and when he first came to me, he was actually he'd done a documentary for Yorkshire TV. He was a vicar, but TV presenter. And he'd done a pro-Scientology piece saying, why are people persecuting Scientology for Yorkshire TV? And it's got somebody dripping with braid and medals, they kind of all of the great, which is, it's actually against the law here and in the United States to put these
Stolen valor.
Yeah, it's like, stop it. But nonetheless, he managed to get an interview with somebody in that. So he's done a pro documentary. Comes to me and he's telling me that he's seen Michael Flynn, and Michael Flynn's paranoid because he thinks that people are taping back together the things that have come out of his shredder.
Yeah.
And I say, well, yeah, actually, it's been presented in court. Things that they've admitted they took from his garbage. So no, it's not him being paranoid, pal. That's what you've got to expect. And
yeah,
the next time I saw him, a month or later, because he was commissioned, by Harrop, I think, to publish a book, he'd changed his mind completely about Scientology. He was going to write the first, pro-Scientology book, but they started harassing him.
Yeah.
He had no intention. He only interviewed 5 people. I was one of the 5. John Atek, a young businessman from East Grinstead, something like that. But they pushed him away, and that's how it kind of gets paranoid. It kind of I couldn't be around St. Hill. I left there in '77 because it was fascistic. And I didn't hear them shouting to each other, but it was just the military feeling of the place.
Yeah.
And I suppose the dawning sense, I did go back, the dawning sense that the people in those sailor suits were not having the best of times.
Yeah.
That there was too much pressure coming down from on high and not enough reward, that people were working a 90-hour week where, they'd have been paid a small fortune if they'd worked in a market or a shop for that amount of time in a week, and coming away with not quite enough money to buy the tobacco to roll their own cigarettes for the week.
Yeah. And it got worse over time.
Out exchange, I think Hubbard called that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's dipped through some dreadful phases over the years, and different things, of course, have been added since we were involved, like the abortion rule, which is a pretty serious idea. One wishes that the Christian right would do something about that. But they're busy actually standing about outside abortion clinics, harassing people.
Yeah.
For some reason, rather than doing something good and beneficial for society, like adopting a Scientologist.
If the Scientologists outlawed abortion, they might get a bit of solidarity.
Well, they probably would, but it's this peculiar situation in the hierarchy that there is not a religious reason for them not to have children. The reason given is purely practical, that they won't be able to work all hours that God sends.
Yeah.
So they're sent to the outer orgs because they can have children.
Any sealed member, any sealed couple who had babies, banished for 4 years.
4 years of banishment. And then what happens to the child at the age of 4? Do they sell them? Or?
Cadet org.
At 4?
Don't know what age did they start the cadet org?
I tend to call all of the kids cadet org because it's impossible to tell, frankly. It was meant to be about 10 years old, but they're 8-year-olds.
Yeah. But the kids they were looked after at Stonelands by a Sea Org nanny who looked after these kids all day long, and they ended up kind of feral, really.
They've been that way for years. I've talked with people who were kids there in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
So from in the 70s, the first Sea Org kids were there in the 70s. Through the 80s, it just perpetuated until Miscavige found a solution for it. No more kids. But I heard of one so-called nanny, not trained as a nanny, just an assumed job title.
Yeah,
They
they
didn't
were
know
never trained.
how not to bang a vase against a faucet technology.
Yeah,
I heard of one with 80 children, and there was a case of a child drowning on a visit to the seaside. And, you know, he'd been forced to take washing up liquid into his mouth, in the notion of wash your mouth out with soap and water, performed by somebody who didn't understand the difference between a detergent and a soap, and is therefore putting something incredibly dangerous into the child's system.
yeah.
Incredibly dangerous, a spoon of washing up liquid. But
Burns.
yeah, just, and strips away fat, grease, because it just breaks it down. So lipid stuff, look out, you know. Not a sensible thing to drink at all.
Yeah,
But this poor child, aged 7 or something, was forced to do this. He subsequently drowned because of a lack of care. It bothers me significantly that I heard of so many cases of these awful things, tens of cases of really awful events, 8 deaths in the Clearwater facilities that all had a strange tone to them. One was an old man who had climbed into a bath that was way too hot and not noticed it, and he was dead. He'd not noticed it, of course, because he was experiencing derealization.
yeah,
Typical after an auditing session, that your sense of space and your perceptual things, rather like after a migraine attack for some people, there's a shift, powerful perceptual shift. He didn't notice that the water was hot enough to, you know, to kill him, basically. But there were, I think, 8 of those, including Lisa McPherson, still completely unanswered for by Scientology. Carl Brennan is another one beyond that, actually, since then, so 9, just in that region. And you find all these, and the incredible way that most of these cases are kept out of the media. That the silence, that sense of we've got to protect the good name of this thing that shouldn't have a good name because it keeps doing this kind of stuff, which we do see in other institutions occasionally.
I'm wondering how quickly the cult is going to hang out to dry Danny Masterson.
How quick have you got?
Well, quite.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to last very long. There are others as well. There are other criminal offences that are in the process of being prosecuted.
Jolly good.
And we'll see exactly that it'll get to a point where it's what David Mayo was the bird dog in the control room. It's like whoever the person is, even if they were, kissing cousins with L. Ron Hubbard,
Okay, hung it up to dry immediately.
Put a head on a pike, as he said in the Hubbard Communication Office Manual of Justice. And I had something to do with that. Because when I was sued for violation of copyright in New York for "Let's sell these people a piece of blue sky," that's the ad plug for today. When I was sued for it, one of the documents that they objected to was me using the Hubbard Communications Office Manual of Justice, which has it's confidential manual of justice, so it's not generally known. And the lawyer went and checked and found that they'd forgotten to renew the copyright on it. It had lapsed. So anybody that would like to go on CreateSpace and publish the Hubbard Communication Office Manual of Justice, which is the internal manual telling you, and it's, I think, the earliest of such manuals, late 50s, early 60s, it's, but he's just getting settled in. And it's got the thing about if anything goes wrong, you blame somebody immediately. You put a head on a pike, because that'll settle things down. You can patch them up later if you got the wrong person, because we're the only people who have the technology to patch people up. Anyway, so you give somebody post-traumatic stress disorder, and then you go, "Oh, we don't want you anymore," and throw them out, which is more likely what's going to happen. Put a head on a pike. But the way that blame was passed from one person to another, year in, year out, and the excuse, because I went through nearly 1,000 UK media pieces, a chapter for Steve Kent, which was never published.
Yeah.
Are at 100 pages, this thing. But it's incredible seeing, you therefore see the sequence of them saying, we don't do that anymore. The people who did that have been sacked, you know,
Yeah.
1963, 1964, year in, year out, all over the place.
Yeah. We don't do that anymore.
We don't do that anymore. We don't chain David Gaiman to the railings anymore. There was a stunt for you.
Yeah.
Might chain Neil Gaiman to the railings sometime. His girlfriend fell pregnant when she was in the Sea Organisation. She was sent away, and
oh, really?
A certain threat emanated about what he should or shouldn't do if he wanted to see his son. And
yeah,
you know, I was involved on the edge of that, and talked with Neil at that time about it, and just the way that they will seek to manipulate people, and the depth of the control. You know, it used to be that this organisation, when it started, was like a rabbit warren. You know, people. You know, it was the late '60s. You know, and people were bed hopping. Then Hubbard seemed to himself start to get, you know, his problems became too much in that department. I think he stopped working in about 1963, by my guess.
Yeah.
I don't think, you know, Viagra hadn't been invented, so I think all the stuff.
He became jealous.
I think he decided that, you know, if he wasn't allowed to do it, then nobody else was. And so, and that eventually becomes the pain and sex.
Pain and sex.
Yeah. Oh dear. Which I don't happen to have to hand at this moment, I don't believe. But
look it up. Pain and sex.
It basically says that they're the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can tell he's really bitter.
He's
when he writes the Pain and Sex bulletin.
Very upset about it, yeah.
It's very bitter indeed.
Can't even enjoy pain anymore. Oh, sorry, sex.
And it's pretty transparent as well. That, you know, here's a guy who's not getting any, so he has to demonize sex.
Yeah.
And it's so patently obvious. Even to people who are in the cult, I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and I'm reasonably convinced that Nibs, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., Hubbard's oldest son, was right in saying that his father during the 1950s was fairly promiscuous.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, it, you know, apart from, I think, Anne Bailey's allegations, which come from the 70s, late 70s. And I don't know what to think about anymore, because things that I rejected very readily in the past, because I know a bit more about it's like when people, if you talk with historians, it's easier now, but you, I'm sure, have had this same problem many years ago. You're talking to somebody, they're interested in history, they've maybe got a history degree or they teach history or something like that, and you start trying to talk to them about the Nazis and magic, and they say, well, there's no such thing as magic, so there's no point knowing that. You know, what other people believe is very important. What motivated them, you know, and what Hitler believed, I don't think we know to this day. But certainly we know that Himmler and Rudolf Hess were both, you know, they were both in the Tula Society, wasn't it, with them?
Tula Society, yeah.
So, and what they're thinking about the world has to have an influence upon.
Yeah, what you believe informs your behaviour.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it seems to be lost. It's like, well, no, magic doesn't work, so therefore. And I think I mean, a similar. That's an aspect of it, because you come out of Scientology and you really have been plunged in magical thinking. I joined from Soto Zen Buddhism, which talks about Gedo Zen, and this is the idea of magic, that this is a stupid thing, you know.
Yeah.
So the story's told of a master who is approached by a devotee of another sect who says, oh yeah, well, my master can perform miracles. And this guy says, yeah. He says, yeah, I can stand one side of the river and he can stand the other, and he can write on a piece of paper I'm holding. And the Zen master says, okay, miracles. When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep. And that's meant to be the whole attitude towards anything supernatural. And that was all right by me. And I went from that into all of this credulous nonsense about superpowers.
Yeah.
And without ever really making any decisions about whether that was a good thing or not. And ultimately I come to Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras around about 500 AD, where he says, there are 5 ways of gaining the siddhis, the magical powers.
Yeah.
And you can use magic, you can use drugs, you can, whatever. But the only way that is useful is wisdom. Because if you're unwise, you will misuse the siddhis. It's like, oh yeah.
Right.
So in Scientology, there was nothing about understanding anything really. It was just about how you were going to become the ultimate narcissistic lump in the ultimate narcissistic universe.
Yeah.
How you would ascend to the solipsism achieved by Ron Hubbard and Donald Trump and a few others.
Yeah. There's nothing empathy building. Nothing that's actually pro-wisdom.
Nothing that's about being alive or having a self or being human. A sort of emptied out, hollow people who are, when you get close to them, incredibly distressed, but project an aura of power and confidence. I mean, people who knew Stalin or who knew Hitler, who knew Mao, that in private, they're horrible, horrible human beings. They're just bugs. But then you put them out in public and they can rouse the masses,
Yeah.
So it goes.
Yeah.
After Hornsey and the spaghetti made and all the other delights of the kitchen, you started going to the library at Swiss Cottage. And what did you start looking for? And what did you first find?
First of all, the books about Scientology.
So,
which would be
Road to Total Freedom, Wallace, Cyril
Vosper, and Bent Corydon.
L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman?
Yeah. Your book.
Yep.
Stuart Lamont.
Religion Inc.
Yeah. And Russell Miller, of course.
Yes, the brilliant Barefaced Messiah.
Yeah. So I read all of those. And then I thought...
Put anybody off.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it does put you off Scientology. It's really interesting how it does that. How learning about something makes you realize what it is, It's interesting how that happens.
Strange coincidences of life, Ted.
And of course, you've studied thousands of hours of Scientology without learning the first thing about it.
Or without even really being able to explain what it is to anyone.
Yeah.
Because when I wanted a simple description of what Scientology is. I'm convinced that the only place in the world where you can find a single chapter description of Scientology is in Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Because nobody else, well, here are the axioms, here are the factors, here's this. So, for example, R247, separateness, root 247 in creation of human ability. As far as I know, and please correct me, anyone who knows otherwise, if I'm wrong. This is the only place that Hubbard says we are not one mass of theta. We are separate individual souls forever. Yeah. Which is, in terms of doctrine, that's one of the most important pieces of information in a religion.
Yeah.
Are you Atman, Jivatman, part of Paramatman, the great soul?
Yeah.
The Hindus, well, can't really say the Hindus, but many Hindus appear to believe. Or are you a distinct, illusory self, as the Buddhists believe, anatta, the no soul doctrine? These are very fundamental questions, or Christian beliefs about spirit and soul as distinct things, which confuses them. I don't know what they're talking about, but there's something going on there. Or the Chinese, who believe in 5 souls within, including the Po, which is what Hubbard called the genetic entity, and Sufis seem to call it nafs. And some people just call it stomachache. You know, I mean, there are different religious designations for these things. Oh. You get so you find your way through the literature, and then what happens? Then where does your interest? This is about 93, 94?
Yeah, 93, 94. Then I start reading about influence, about persuasion, about how we get conned. So I've read Martin Gardner, and I've read Cialdini. I've read a ton of stuff. Pratt, Canis and Aronson.
Age of Propaganda.
Yeah.
Superb book. And Cialdini's influence. Lifton, of course.
Yeah, Lifton.
Robert J. Lifton.
And VANCE PACKARD.
Yeah, The Hidden Persuaders. Status Seekers after that.
Yes.
Yeah, there is this great list of did you read Stuart EWEN on PR?
I didn't. No, I didn't move into PR because it felt too technical.
Well, after Age of Propaganda, he really is talking about how propaganda is done. And at the core of his book is an interview with Edward Bernays. And Edward Bernays is 104 years old or whatever by this time. There's some film, I think, from this same interview. Could be another one. But the things that he says, that I don't care anymore. There is no such thing as public relations. There never was. There's propaganda. That's all there is. And of course, that's what he said. Propaganda. That's what it's called.
Edward Bernays.
And because he said when he first saw, before the Second War, he saw Goebbels doing what he was doing. He said, "Oh, he's read my book."
Yeah.
And when you get that whole link into George Creel and the American intelligence services in World War I, and the way that you got the muckraking journalists, the progressive journalists, called Muckrakers by Teddy Roosevelt, and they're going to change society. You get photogravure and you suddenly have pictures of poor people, not engravings. Nobody's making this up. This is horrific. And you're letting it happen. We're pushing it through your door. And those people are then, so they learn. And on the other side of them are the Ivy Lee and Edward Bernays, developing advertising and PR techniques, propaganda strategies. And they all fused together in the First War with George Creel. And you get this display out into Madison Avenue, where you've got intelligence connected people. So the sinister conspiratorial plot continues. You've got journalists who are the usual cover for spies. And sometimes you can't tell the difference between them. And you've got intelligence propaganda. And of course, in the US, that leaked through into the MK Ultra, MK Naomi mind control projects, that you've got an overlap of people from these different fields. And this really dangerous toxic mix where the whole of society, to one extent or another, is being controlled by the same club of people who have links back into intelligence agencies. And then you've got the people who are trying to do something about that, and it's hard to know which is which, given the way in which people would be persuaded to represent the wrong interests, let alone anything else.
Howard talks about this small cabal of people that are conspiring to subvert the world, subvert politics and economics around the world for their own ends, including Cecil King.
And Aaron Hubbard hired a professional Mary Sue Hubbard has hired professional intelligence agents, and I quote, I said this the other day, I was talking with Bonnie, professional intelligence agents. It's runs Journal 67. It's one of the super contradictions where he says you don't, you don't stop the fire engine to look after the dogs that are barking at the wheels. So you did criticism, water off a duck's back. However, Mary Sue has hired professional intelligence agents, i.e. ex-CIA, MI6, not private detectives. It's actually Vic Filson, who was a private detective, but, that's just the truth. And we don't want to get that in the way of L. Ron Hubbard's stories. So he's saying, fire engine, dogs, forget about it. And Cecil King, the press baron, and Harold Wilson, the Prime Minister of Britain, were both under full investigation by an intelligence agent.
Yeah.
And what he didn't know is he was telling the truth, that Harold Wilson was indeed not only under such an investigation, but they were trying to, it was MI5, wasn't it? The internal agency. They were trying to blacken him as a communist working for Russia.
Yeah.
Because that's their job. And the Peter Wright book, all of where the Thatcher government were economical with the truth, I believe the man testified on the stand in Australia. That they were using taxpayers' money to get rid of the Prime Minister. Yeah. But at the same time,
Hubbard was accidentally right.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, Hubbard was trying to. It wasn't that he was right. He felt that Wilson was opposed to Scientology. He wasn't. I don't think he ever accused him of being a communist or anything like that, which would have been easy to do. He was an Oxford professor who'd spent time in Moscow. Anybody can find that. And it's how the story was concocted.
But Hubbard was a bit Trumpian in that he didn't really know what he was talking about. So
he did seem to have the "I am talking out of another orifice in the lower part of my body" attitude quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
When we had his purification rundown, I don't know whose idea it was. It wasn't mine, but it was a brilliant idea. We brought in a toxicologist, PhD professional, who actually deconstructed line by line the purification rundown course and said, he says here, it is thought by some people.
Yeah.
And she was so matter of fact. There was no hint of sarcasm in the way. There would have been if I'd done it.
Yeah.
But she went all the way through and said, so in fact, he's not actually asserting that this has any scientific validity. There's nowhere where he's just saying, I think this might. And there is no evidence supporting, I don't think there was evidence for anything that was said in that she could think of. How astonishing that we became involved in something that it's so easy to pick holes in it.
Yeah, it's so demonstrably false.
But where did we come from, and what was it that ended it?
We're looking at it at an angle. We're looking at it at an angle that obscures the actuality. We can't see it from a direct right angle where you see what the picture is. We're looking at it anamorphically.
Yeah, and the way it starts is you're offered something you really want by people who are really nice.
Yeah.
And you're told you'll be able to help people significantly. Yeah. And you're told that you'll feel better if you don't feel well.
Yeah.
Or you don't feel happy, whatever. You don't feel well.
There's a purity about that.
Yeah.
There's a purity about that you don't get with regular contricts, because regular contricts exploit your greed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
More than anything else.
So true. Very good.
There's a purity of Scientology in that it's not exploiting your greed, it's exploiting your humanitarianism. Which is one reason.
We'll exploit your greed if necessary. If, for example, you're a salesman and you want to earn more money, it'll say you'll earn more money. But I think it will exploit anything, basically. And you're so right, with contracts, it's almost always about, David Maurer, the wonderful work from which the Sting came, that it's greed. You just get somebody who wants to get something for nothing, and you pull them along. And often they'll come back and ask for more, which was one of the weirdest things that Maurer found out.
Yeah.
Because the stringer and the leader, the guy thinks it was the stringer who tricked him. So now he's going to give you another 20,000 to put into On the Wire or wherever.
Yeah.
But it's true that it will exploit whatever weakness you have, whatever strength you wish to have, whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I separated people out. There were the salespeople, pretty obvious, always willing to lie, absolutely willing to lie, drop of a hat, anything that would get them more money, and they were not my tribe. Then you've got the seekers, the people who. Then you've got the mental patients, who were usually people who had some mild disorder. They might be avoidant personality disorder, for example. You'll see some of those around. People are shy. Social anxiety disorder. You see a little bit of that around.
Yeah.
But largely it was salespeople, con men and women. And
every so often you get some actual crazy people.
Yeah.
And they walk in, and although it's arguable that Scientologists are actual crazy people, it's the crazy people that have just walked into the org don't share your delusions, so therefore they're crazy. They're properly crazy.
Yeah.
We're all sane in this here org.
They disagree with anything.
We haven't got a shared reality here.
Yeah. Which is, it is a normal judgment of insanity. I think that you don't agree with me, therefore you're nuts.
Yeah,
seems a reasonable principle. The problem is who's holding the point of view.
Yeah.
What about emotional changes for you? How did you feel when you left? Because I felt fantastic. I had one of the best years of my life, even though it was very busy, because it just felt as if the chains had been taken off and I hadn't known they were there.
Yeah. Well, I've always been worried. I've always had that kind of worry, panic disorder, anxiety, all that kind of thing going on. So for me, after the first couple of weeks of freedom, then I started to worry about where I was in life, where I was going, what I was doing.
And how old were you then?
Now I've got to worry about things. I was 27, 28. I'm starting to worry about where I am, my place in the world.
I was 28 when I left.
Yeah.
But my place was like round the corner and just inside the gate, and up the path.
Yeah.
Different spiritual disciplines. So, and I mean, I sort of went off and read Krishnamurti and went back and read some Buddhist stuff, read Taoist stuff. Did you do that kind of thing?
I read a fair bit of psychology rather than spirituality.
Yeah, I think it's a safer bet generally.
Yeah.
Though not always, there's so much
always.
guff being spoken in that area that the wrong.
I'd like to have read both, I very much would, because I kind of got involved with an early incarnation of the Dawkins mindset for a couple of years. And then I went, hang on a minute, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
Because it's going back to that idea that there's no such thing as the spirit, therefore everything you say is nonsense. Which sadly is what the new atheism is all about. It's all about denying that there can be anything spiritual, denying that there can be anything spiritual, and therefore discounting anything that any religious people have to say, which is ridiculous, because there are lots of things that have been influenced by spirituality that are great.
And we really, my thought for a long time has been that they threw out the bathwater with the baby.
Yeah.
Bathwater actually was this incredibly nutritious soup that so much of our philosophy, so much of our view of the world has developed within
art.
that. And at times it's been stultifying and awful. To me, it's terrible to think that you have to go after Kant, who I haven't read, into the 19th century before anybody dares sort of say, well, there could be a philosophy that's not. And Schopenhauer reads the Upanishads, start sorting something out from his thoughts about that, which to me don't, he definitely did a lot of thinking. He didn't just transcribe the Upanishads. He did a lot of thinking. Talks about the triumph of the will, which would later be so useful. And Nietzsche after him, this deconstruction of religious belief that it's so passé, having, this many years later, having somebody suddenly go, oh, I'm gonna convert the world to, and all the stuff that went with that. They were going to have T-shirts with a red letter A on, and I'm going, that's Hester Prynne, isn't it? That's the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and it means not atheist but adulterer. So they were going to meet every Sunday, and then they did. The last time I looked, a couple of years back, there were more than 120 Sunday meetings you could go to, where you could clap and sing songs about how great it is that there isn't a God or something. That you could get together with like-minded, I'm not going to say bigots, and celebrate your, I'm not going to say bigotry.
I remember Alain de Botton talking about how we should have cathedrals for atheists. Why do you want to do that?
It's called modern architecture. It's been happening for 200 years. Where is he living?
Go to a football match. Go to a football match if you want something spiritual.
Yeah, or a concert, or whatever it gets you. And so much of it is that. So there's the crowd effect, which I'd not really thought about it. It's not something that does anything for me. I've been to incredible concerts where the music is incredible. I've been in a crowd of 600,000 people because it was the Isle of Wight 50 years ago. This August, but it doesn't make me go, wow, I'm completely out of control. I have no mind of my own. Or, and I haven't got a lighter to do that with. But I can also go and sing along with the crowd, and that's fine to do that. And I can have, I went to see Stuart Lee in January, and I told a friend, within 90 seconds, I was crying. And a friend being Yuval Law said, that's because you were in a group of people. I said, no, that's because he was incredibly funny.
That's because it's Stuart Lee.
Sorry. And he kept me that way all the way through, except when he was doing Ricky Gervais speaking the unspeakable. He has to have 10 minutes of retching for some reason in his act, and you just have to sit there patiently and go, hopefully he'll grow out of it one day. Yeah, got it. Thanks, Stu. He was superb, but it's not a crowd effect for me. But I think people do get lifted by that. And I think there's also, I've avoided the word spiritual since I left Scientology. Really have, because I've got no idea what it means. But if I was to hazard a guess at what it meant, it's that there is a mental universe as well as a physical universe. And as I believe it was Kant, who I haven't read, said, that we each of us have our own, through our own interpretation and perception, our own world in which we live. So we live in the theatre of the mind, as some call it. And some people take that further than others. For Hubbard, the theatre of the mind is a kind of little puppet place where you have file clerks and, numbskulls, I think they're called in the...
the numbskulls.
Is it the dandy? We put that into evidence in one of the cases. In fact, we put OT3 and the numbskulls to say, this isn't new technology. But sadly, it never went before a judge. It would have been so much fun. No sense of humour, some religions.
It is a very computery sort of analogy to the brain, a very powerful computer which feeds you with images when you ask for it, or robotically it just gives you the image as soon as you ask for it.
It just works somehow. Yeah. So I was talking with Bonnie on Tuesday and going, you've got 1.25 quadrillion. I've got no idea what a quadrillion is. It's a sort of mix of measure of time and dance.
Yeah.
And that's like space time I can almost get, but dance time is like, whoa, that is pretty freaky. But apparently for however long that is, and it's more than trillions of years, we've been stacking up 24 little slides per second.
Yeah.
Mental image pictures.
In 52 perceptics.
52 perceptics. Now
Yeah.
52 perceptics. Yeah. I think the most I've ever seen anybody else get to is 27. So 52 is pretty good, but
it's not very ambitious though, having 26 frames, considering the refresh rate of my monitor is at least 60 hertz.
Yeah, but let's face it, the OT3 implants only run to 1966. Any aeroplane or suit or anything designed after that will not be included in the implant.
It's a wonder that he didn't say it contains 405 lines.
Yes.
625 lines.
625, yeah. And these don't have any mass, except, of course, when the thetan leaves the body, there's 2 ounces, because of the famous guy who weighed somebody dying.
Yeah.
He expelled 2 ounces worth of gas after expiring, one presumes, But
it's never been repeated, apparently, that experiment.
No.
Putting somebody on the scales in order to die. What's
Grandma, you want to. Help science.
Come on, get on the scales, Grandma.
The scales of justice.
It's your last 3 hours in this world, so just perch there.
Yeah, this could seg into Bill Hicks talking about, how to get rid of your grandparents and have incredible stunts in movies, but that would be completely tasteless, so I don't think we've got to go there. Bless the man, though.
Yes, I was just talking about him yesterday.
Well, it was you who introduced me to him back in '96.
Right.
And Bill Bailey. It was people called Bill.
Yeah,
all the Bills. People called Bill at that time.
Yeah.
Human slaves in an insect nation. Human slaves in an insect nation. That'll now be at the end of this video, because that's how Spike does things. Right?
Human slaves.
Yeah, she'll go, oh, that's my favourite bit, and put it on at the end.
Yeah.
It is a great song, though.
It is. It's excellent.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, that takes us up to... I want to understand more about feelings. Because, as I say, I felt a kind of exaltation, and it was only as the harassment began that that changed. And then as all the people around me were going, "Oh, stop it, John, leave them alone. What have they ever done to you?" It's like, well, they hadn't until I left, And then they started, somebody started breaking into my house and nicking my stuff and picketing me. And there's a guy lived, he got a room opposite for 2 years from which he was filming my front door. And then he became my driver. He volunteered and he'd drive me places. I mean, it only happened about half a dozen times, but it was very troubling.
Yeah.
To find that out, to realize that people are infiltrating your life because you're talking about what they believe in. You're talking about what their leader has said and asking for them to be helped. At all points, I've never put my name to anything that would seek to harm or damage a Scientologist.
Yeah, it's important. If you're going to leave an organization on principle, make sure that you have got principles. Otherwise, why have you left?
And it seems so snarky, the amount of people I've had over the years who said, "Oh, you could do this to Scientology, you could do that to Scientology." It's like,
well, no, because
they're
Scientologists, and I used to be one, and I would have hated that to have happened to me. So
it would have made my belief firmer, and it would have made it less likely that I'd leave. So what can we do that will help people to leave? I mean, have we talked about this before? I suggest that people set up, email accounts in whatever names they choose, which are relatively secure. Proton Mail's quite good, I'm told. And then write to letter registrars in the organizations of the world. And you can write to, if you've got the time, you can write to 400 or 500 of these people a day, because you can send them all the same letter.
Yeah.
And so all you need, and you'll still, because you can ignore what's said back to you. But no, that's not really true. I think what people should do is make some communication, some contact with a letter registrar. So you write a letter to whichever church of Scientology, and that's who it'll go to, and start a conversation, but a conversation about how they are, about what they're up to, how their day goes, a conversation about them.
Wresting control of the session back from the auditor. Yeah,
giving the locus of control back to the individual from the organization. So, because the worst thing is there's no time, and you're not really allowed to think about, that whole thing of you don't get to use a stove. You don't get into the kitchen. You are now this thing, this terminal, as Hubbard put it, this terminal.
Terminal now.
And he never explained which of us were positive and which of us were negative terminals. So we could get into some pretty repulsive situations. If we're the good terminals, then we'll repulse the other good terminals, because it's a two-terminal universe.
It is a two-terminal universe.
So all dichotomies, it's one of the things that it really finally clicked, that it was, everything's a double bind.
Yeah.
Plus, minus, black and white. And you look at that, the Korzybski chart that he borrowed, we've used it before, actually. It's the end of science of survival, the infinity valued logic, which is this bit here. This is the copy I was awarded by the Birmingham Mission, by the head, Jill Pessish, the lovely, wonderful Jill Pessish, presented to John with love and ARC.
And ARC as well.
And ARC as well. She was the deputy ED, not the ED, deputy executive director. But infinity valued logic, it's the only appearance it makes in all of Scientology, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Because everything else is black and white, two terminals, to be or not to be. The Gold's problems, masses of what are
terms and octans.
Yep. So grade 6, the clearing course, the old OT1, OT2. You're just dealing with the Gold's problems, masses, which are the implants that held together whatever it was that came out of OT3 that would make the is it a DC-8, the aeroplane in them? But
yes, it was a DC-8.
It's the bank is full of all these images. That's one of the implants.
Yeah, that's the R6 bank.
Yeah, the 75 million years ago, these book covers were
train dolls.
Yeah, train dolls. Yeah, sadly, I should have the whole. They're the books I bought when I got in, the 60s ones, because they'd overprinted so many.
Yeah,
I went in 75. I went to the bookstore where Gibby was still there at St Hill, one of the original, the real 50s old timers, and he said, "You'll like something more interesting," and he gave me a first edition of Self-Analysis from 1951, I think it is.
Yeah.
And he'd still got them. They printed so many that here, nearly 25 years later, he'd still got a stack of them. And they just put out a new edition every now and then. And, so I think I've got first editions of most things by now. I've got this. Most people have never even seen this. A summary on Scientology.
A summary on Scientology for scientists.
Yeah, that's it. My mirror reading is not very good. A paper on the difficulties of researching in the humanities, 1969. For about 38 years at this writing, 1969, I have been engaged upon basic research into life and the humanities, using only gin, amphetamines, Benzodrine, Demerol, and anything else I get my hands on. The difference between what he's done and the efforts of early philosophers is that the research has been done from the viewpoint of scientific methodology,
which he knows all about.
He says, in which I am trained.
Yeah.
scientific methodology. And I took whatever mathematics and physics were offered at university. It doesn't say until they threw me out.
Until they threw me out, yeah.
Because I'd failed. In under a year, by use of endocrine experiments on the basis that the endocrines are a switchboard of stimulus response, I found that functions seemed to monitor structure in living forms. When was this year of endocrine research conducted? I'd love to know. You know, it's got to be when he was at Oak Knoll in hospital,
Yeah.
because he spent a year there, so the time's true.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a researcher, he was a
patient.
Yeah. Just before this publication, the US Navy's Office of Naval Research approached me and made a threatening offer that I must go to work for them as a civilian or be recalled to active duty. It's a frightening life. Let me just see. I'm near the end of it. I just want to see if he says anything else wonderful that the public should know about. In my time, I have seen Dr. Wilhelm Reich, MD, who was researching in small energies in the mind, killed by the FDA of the US at the urgings of over-financed interests. So true.
Yeah. Yeah, that happened.
That happened. That's it. That's all I could find in there that was interesting. That's appalling. You have this rare document. You go, look, I've got this rare document. There's nothing really interesting.
And it turns out to be Hubbard being an arse.
Yet again.
Being an arse again. Oh, we missed the Hubbard. Good Lord.
Can't help himself.
But he was the most pronounced arse.
It's that funny thought that you know, temporal lobe epilepsy, the Bear-Fedio characteristic list.
Yeah.
And you look at hypergraphia, you go, yeah, they can't stop writing. And then you go, Guinness Book of World Records, most prolific author of all time, Ron Hubbard. It's like,
yeah.
Hypergraphia. So he definitely had that one.
Yeah.
They're not being very nice at times, and the religious experiences, who knows? You know,
yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, this has been fun, and we'll pick up from the next point to some other point. And
yeah.
I will keep talking to you as a person and a friend.
Yeah.
After we finish this battering and humiliating ordeal. So thank you very much indeed, Ed.
Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Yes.
That'll now be at the end of this video, because that's how Spike does things.